So let's talk about Patreon, because we were about to get into the discussion off recording and realized, wow, we should really talk about this because I have it set up and you don't. So what's the deal?
I've never really felt like I had anything to properly offer on it because I hear so many horror stories of people who are, they sort of work themselves into a corner with having to promise all of the perks that you would get from Patreon or Kickstarter or something like that, that those rewards end up being more work than the original thing. You know, they have no time for making regular videos because they're too busy making all the parts for the supporters. And I know that you can just sort of show off behind the scenes stuff, but I sort of do that on the main channel anyway.
Yeah, you do, now that I think of it. But so, okay, how do I put this? Yeah, you can definitely dig yourself into a hole by creating these crazy good perks, and then what happens is you'll end up spending all your time doing little drawings for people because they supported your animation channel. But if you realize that could happen, then it's actually probably not going to be a problem.
Yeah, I guess you're right, because those stories that you hear, it's often like, I'm going to give everyone a t-shirt. And it's like, have you considered what printing and shipping those is like? That's a lot of work. And it can take years to catch up if you get a lot of people backing. But I guess one thing is I wouldn't get a lot of people backing, so it wouldn't be too difficult to keep them happy.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to turn away people that actually want to support your channel. But
Well,
the thing is, you don't actually need to offer these crazy perks where it's like original art. Because in my case, I find that most supporters are happy to just be supporting and having the content continue to exist.
right.
Rather than getting a special piece of art. Because if they wanted a special piece of art, they would commission you.
It's one reason why I'm doing the game, though. It's so that, you can pay this, like, flat fee, and then you just get a thing, and by getting it, it sort of keeps everything else afloat as well. So, ongoing incremental payments in between that don't really get anything extra. I guess I've always felt a little bit strange about it. I'm not sure why.
Okay, yeah, no, I know why, because I felt strange about it too. Which you feel like you're getting money for nothing, and that feels wrong.
Even though pumping out up to 2 videos a day is certainly not nothing.
Yeah, exactly. That it's basically you're creating free content, and there are some people who would like to tip you, like the same way they would tip at a restaurant.
As you're saying, there have been people that get in touch saying, like, can I contribute? And it's like, that's very nice to hear.
Yeah, I think you should set one up, and you don't really need to offer, I'll draw you something by hand or anything like that. So in my case, I do offer that, but what I find is that a lot of people who sign on for those tiers don't really need the reward. They just say, oh yeah, no, I really want this series to continue. So one of my current sponsors for Scribble Kibble, I said, okay, yeah, you get a title card inside the episode. You can put a picture, you can put your name there. What do you want to put there? And they said, actually, I just want Scribble Kibble to keep going. And I don't really care if my name is in there. Actually, if it's better for the show for my name not to be in there, I'd rather that were the case. And I said, well, I'm definitely going to put your name in there because I'm pretty sure 3 seconds of someone's name being on screen at the end of the episode is not, it's not obtrusive. Not obtrusive the way, yeah.
It's an interesting thought. I've gone back and forth about that kind of thing over the years. At one point, what I was really hoping to do was sort of like the live streaming busking sort of thing, where if anyone dropped a few dollars while I was working on a thing, and I'd sort of just drop everything and do a little 10-second scribble of whatever they wanted. Like their message would have a thing, and I'll be like, okay, cool, I'll just scribble that. And because it only takes 10-15 seconds, it's not a whole lot of work, but they're still getting something for that tip. But then live streaming sort of became impossible because of Australian internet.
Oh, yeah, because I've never seen you live stream.
Well, I used to do it fairly regularly, but it got to a point where nearly 50% of the time I would have to bail on the audience because it just wasn't sustaining itself. But then again, I was running pretty ancient hardware at the time, so maybe just having a better computer would help it function a bit better. it's probably worth another crack. However, the balance of productivity and trying to be entertaining is quite interesting. I sort of just tend to interact with people for ages and don't get a whole lot done.
Oh, that's like what we kind of talked about that in the whole episode about the live streaming, all of the balance of the...
Oh golly, we've talked about that already. It's only this like second session we're already recovering the same ground.
No. So, but going back to the Patreon thing, I mean, that's the thing, is because sometimes people just want to leave a tip and they don't even really need a scribble or to have a message on screen, because I have that sort of tip option, and sometimes people just leave it blank.
So I guess I'm just trying to play devil's advocate here as to all the reasons why I've sort of gotten put off it. And I think one was thinking about myself as a consumer and wanting to help out other artists, is that there's times where I want to be able to help people out on an ongoing basis. But then there's also the ones where it's like, oh, a one-off would be nice. And Patreon's more of an ongoing or bust. And I understand that everyone only has... Therefore, there's only so many people that they can contribute to helping before it just gets a little bit ridiculous. And, you'd hypothetically just be spending hundreds of dollars a month by giving 20 people $5. So therefore, I thought it was unfortunate that it would create unwanted competition with peers, because YouTube is wonderfully not very competitive because you're not competing for people's attention. You can just, if two videos are good, you can just watch both videos. But when finances become involved, people do still have to start choosing, do I want to help this person or do I want to help this person? And having to sort of market myself as to like, oh, I think I'm good enough for your dollars, which frankly I don't. so I'll just sort of keep putting things out and work on this side project on the side that is worth whatever its dollar amount is. But I don't know. Maybe I should just like give it a crack and see how it goes.
Okay, so I just see this in so much more of a business perspective. Maybe because I've been doing this for a while, but
that's fair.
I mean, in the position where all of the money you either make money or you don't, and if you don't make money, you fail. So you can't turn away people for that reason. You have to be very selective about when you turn people away. But in your case, you're making this game, and there's really no harm in having a Patreon, and since you can set it up per item or per month.
Oh, you can do per item, okay.
Yeah, you could do per item. So then in that case, that's actually how it started. They did not used to have a per month thing.
Huh.
The per month thing works out well for me because there'll be some episodes that take a long time to make. So like right now, Scribble Kibble's been on hiatus, but people are still supporting, so I can still keep developing all the redo stuff that I have to do.
Now that you mention it, if there was any time to do it, it would be around now. Because the other thing that sort of put me off was the forced accountability. If people are now paying on a month-by-month basis, then there is obligation to consistently always having things coming out. But I always had other priorities, whether it be freelance or full-time in studio work. I didn't want to have I wanted to be able to have the freedom that if there isn't the time or the energy to make something, I didn't have to.
Yeah, but you don't have that anymore. I mean, now you actually almost need the accountability. But, if it's...
Yeah, like this is my full-time focus now. Freelance opportunities are coming along and I'm turning them down because I know that I have to focus myself as much as possible to this one thing. Otherwise, it simply won't happen. And that's why I do like the recap videos. It's why in the footage in some of these podcasts, I'm putting time lapses of the project as well. All methods to kind of just be showing off, hey, look, progress is happening, and have that consistently enough that if progress stops, people will start to wonder why.
Oh, yeah. I would wonder why. I'm just trying to think of how, if I was you and I was going to set up a Patreon, how I would do it, because it doesn't sound like you want to put in a bunch of additional work doing special perks.
Well, there's already too much work because like regular onion skin videos are kind of the perk for making the project already, because I could just be making it in silence and just hoping that people would like it at the end.
No, that won't get you anywhere. You need to be doing it now because you need the marketing. If you just suddenly have a game at the end, and it's not going to work out. Yeah, no.
Exactly. So it is like a necessary sacrifice for that reason to be spending about a fifth or nearly a quarter of the time on taking footage of stuff that I've made and talking about it and discussing with the audience and showing off like, okay, this is my first attempt at this. What do you think? Because I don't have a boss to get notes from anymore. But in a way that sort of cuts out the middleman. I can just ask the customer directly if they think it's good, and if they think it's bad, then I'll do it again. But sorry, that's a bit of a different topic though.
Yeah, no, I'm even starting to think of the Kickstarter thing now, because in your situation where you have this game, and you talked about in one of your game development episodes, people said, oh, well, what if you could customize the character? And then it kind of became a feature creep issue where, well, yes, you could do that, but this has how much more time it would take me, and thereby this much money. But with something like Kickstarter or even Patreon, you could say, well, if you really want that feature, here's the amount of money we need to raise.
Yeah, it's definitely not at the point of being, if I were to go the Kickstarter route, it's not at that point yet. Usually those campaigns will have, at least a trailer. I'm not that far yet. So I need to have at least a functional prototype and stuff. So I guess that's not impossible, but what I would rather do, because there is that base audience of people who are following along with the project, rather than going the Kickstarter out, it might be easier to simply just release the game onto the App Store in its current form at its final price. And that is just quite simply, hey, if you buy it now, then, that funding is injected straight back into the project again to help it get over the finishing line.
I don't know. That I feel like we would need another person to talk about, because there are people who release the game before it's finished, and I feel like that usually bites them in the butt in a bad way if the game isn't ready or something,
because people start reviewing it early. Early access stuff is weird, isn't it?
Yeah, I've got an example of this. So there's a game called Graveyard Keeper, which is sort of the successor to another game called Stardew Valley. Both games are, you build a farm or a graveyard or whatever. But with Graveyard Keeper, people got really upset because the game said it was going to have certain features, and when it came out, it didn't. So people were like, where are these features? And maybe they're still working on them. I don't quite know, but there were a lot of bad reviews about the end of the game that seemed really inconclusive and rushed. And there were a bunch of parts of the game that were just not, like parts of the world you couldn't go to, even though it seemed like you should be able to.
Well, whether or not people are downloading an early access or contributing to a Kickstarter, both of those have the same problem, don't they? Where they are investing in what they are being told a final product is likely to be, and if it turns out to be different than their investment, then it's justified for them to feel a little bit let down.
Yeah, I guess so.
Even though that is, an investment will always have that risk.
And as far as the Kickstarters go, I feel like those are those take a lot more planning and, stuff that's already made to set up. Whereas a Patreon, you just say, hey, I'm this artist, I'm making these things, this is what I'm making. You can support me or not.
That's true. And it would be an Onion Skin one, not a Willpower one, supporting the videos coming out, not the production of the big game.
Yeah.
But it would help get that over the line if it helps cover the groceries.
That's what I'm saying. Like, come on. You can't just say, well, I'd be competing with other artists. And even though it seems like on YouTube you're not competing, you are, because there are a lot of people who release videos that are 30 minutes to an hour long. And if you're watching something that long, then yeah, you kind of sacrifice browsing around to look at other people's stuff, because time is also a limiter, not just money.
Yeah, you're probably right. Okay, I'll tell you what. Let's see how this episode goes. And then what people have to say in that, because these go up on your channel, assuming that people have gone over and watched one or two of mine and what they say, then I'll definitely take that into account.
Yeah, so should Onion Skin start a Patreon or not?
what would you expect from it though? Like, would it just be what I've been doing, just the 1 or 2 videos a day?
I would be expecting, that. I would just be expecting more videos. And I would be expecting that you don't suddenly disappear.
Maybe there would be like, oh yeah, suddenly disappearing, because that's something I've had a tendency to do. And having that little bit of backing would definitely prevent that.
Yeah,
So
that's the point.
Pretty good point. I almost feel like I'm threatening people. Help me out or I'm going.
Well, no, I mean, it does feel that way, but some people are very verbal about it and some are not. So I'm the type of person that, you are supporting me to get this content and I'm going to make it for you. And if I don't make it for you, then I will just disable the ability to send me money, because you can do that. But some people say, hey, I absolutely need this money, or I have to go get a job bagging groceries somewhere. I either have the money and I'm making art, or I don't.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's funny how, and I think why these conversations are good, because we are from those two different worlds, because the opposite can happen as well. When people come up to me asking for advice on dealing with clients or studios and negotiating finances there, you're right. I am a bit more brutal and honest there. Like, I don't want to be seeing young artists getting ripped off. So, but for some reason here, I seem to be a little bit more lenient to giving work away for next to nothing.
Exactly. Isn't that a little bit of a paradox? Like, not a paradox, but what is the word I'm thinking of? Saying one thing and doing the other.
Because the opposite happens, right? Where people can get by online, but getting a big in-studio opportunity is an exciting thing that they haven't been able to do before, and sometimes quite lenient to accepting an offer that just isn't worthwhile simply for the sake of not wanting to miss an opportunity.
Yeah, I was going to say, because that's my situation where I think it would be very good for my development to work on a studio project. So I might get so excited that I sign a contract that is paying really poorly and on a project that isn't going to really mean anything to me in the end.
Well, here's one for you. If you have a Patreon now, if an opportunity like that were to come along, would it prevent you from doing it? Because it means you'd be, having to sort of dip out on your customers for a while.
I've thought about that. So I think what would happen first is I would write a note to everybody and say, hey, this is happening. And because of the situation, I probably can't share too much information about it, non-disclosure agreements and stuff. But if I ended up being so busy that I couldn't produce anything for anybody anymore, then I would just probably turn it off and I'd say, I'll be back later.
Yeah.
And then I'd have to start all over from the ground up collecting people again, which is fine. But yeah, I really don't think it's fair to take people's money if I'm at a studio working full time and when I come home, I'm not producing anything original. That would be a problem.
Yeah. That's a good point as well, though, because of the month-by-month basis is that is fairly short-term. Like, people are contributing for the content that will be coming out that month versus Kickstarter, where it's, we're investing for something that's going to be coming out over the coming years.
Mm-hmm.
So it is a bit easier to turn off a Patreon if life sort of swings in that direction. But if everyone's invested in a Kickstarter project and then life happens and you can't complete it, then yeah, it's going to be a lot easier for people to be feeling cheated.
Yeah, that's I have only contributed to Kickstarter campaigns. I haven't actually run one, and yeah, I would definitely be planning for life to happen if I had a Kickstarter, because it's so important that you deliver on what you said you would.
Yeah, sorry, go on.
I was gonna say, but for Patreon, you have the option to turn it off when you're done. Either you're not able to produce for a couple months, some bad life issue happened and it's going to keep you busy, or you could just not publish an item that withdraws funds if you're doing a per item basis.
Indeed. And Kickstarter's a whole different ballgame like that, because life does happen and it happens quickly. Every other week there's some weird curveball that I didn't see coming that suddenly has to be dealt with. The whole thing that I would be going solo again and making this thing full time, I didn't know that would happen until about 3 weeks before it actually happened.
But that's okay. So there's an adage I've heard about that. If you decide to do something and do it, then you're more likely to actually succeed at doing it. If you sit around and think about making a big change, then what happens is all of the people, all of like the little demons in your head that you owe money to or whatever, they're going to come back at you and they're going to start saying, well, you probably shouldn't do that because if you go get the studio job, you'll make more money. And, oh, you're probably not good enough to start off on your own, or you probably don't deserve that money. And there's other artists who deserve it more than you do. So if you sit around and think about something, the devil's going to come get you before you can get out of hell.
Indeed, I've had that happen a couple of times. It's a strange scenario, and because in a way it can be a good problem, because it's like, oh, if you've got more than one opportunity and you have to decide between one, theoretically that's great, because how many people get that chance? And I feel very, very lucky. But having to make a decision is rough, and weighing it all up, where maybe it would have been easier to just sort of toss a coin or make a decision, as you're saying. The longer it takes, the more difficult it comes. And that's why when I did start going solo again, it had to be that quick thing, just over a couple of weeks. No, where 3 weeks before it happened, I didn't know it was happening. Because the stars aligned in a certain way, and I was just kind of like, okay, yeah, I'll just do it.
The stars aligned in a certain way. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, well, I had like an opportunity to sort of bail on this plan if I had to, but I think I'd sort of already made up my mind by the time the my bailout option had expired, if that makes sense.
No, that makes sense. But that's probably because I know the story behind it, and not everybody listening might not.
I'm sort of tiptoeing around a few subjects, yeah. Like, I'll talk about things as it becomes relevant, I suppose. But we're still talking about just sort of making your way.
Yeah. Yeah, we were talking about Patreon and Kickstarter. And I guess the topic of the episode really is overcoming your thoughts that you don't deserve it or that it's not going to work out, and just trying it and being careful to not get sucked in above your head. Like, not to promise too much to people when it really doesn't have to be complicated. It can be simple.
What about the opposite problem, though, where it could be that you're getting very excited about it and then just no one shows up? That could be very disheartening.
Oh my gosh, that's the worst. Why would you even say something like that?
Well, that's more common to happen than not.
Yeah, that's why it's so bad. It happens all the time. That is really disheartening. And I'll just say this because I'm putting together a panel of undiscovered animations and animators, more or less, for this convention next week. And it's really disheartening in a way, because there will be people who create these 16-minute long, completely high quality film productions and get 30,000 views because they never really put anything else out there before, so nobody has no idea that they exist. Right.
And even just getting those shares or retweets can be next to impossible. I don't know.
It's because you don't have a clientele, you don't have an audience. So we were just talking about that within your case. If you decided, okay, for this next year, I'm going to work on Willpower, my game, but I'm not going to show anybody. It's going to be a secret. And then what happens is you post the game, and the only people who really are going to know about it are your friends and your what little audience you do have.
Real life people. Yeah. So, but I guess for people who have probably come on to a video that's talking about, should I make a Patreon or not? I'd imagine there would be a few that are wondering that question for themselves. And is it the right decision for everyone, even if they don't have an established audience? What do you think?
No. Okay, so this is the other thing. In your case, you've got an established audience. So I think it would make a lot of sense for you to start one. But there are a lot of people who don't have an audience and they start a Patreon. And what happens is they have no supporters. So when somebody like me goes to look at your page and I see you have no supporters, that makes me hesitant of joining, because for some reason I'm the only person. So it's really good to start, I think, once you have a nice base audience, so that everybody can join in together and nobody feels like they're the first person taking some kind of risk.
Yeah, I think joining a small one, like I can understand why that hesitance would be there. Because if there is only like, oh, this person's getting $3 a month, contributing another $1 to that isn't going to make the difference between them being able to pump out a huge amount of art or not. Typically, they either would be regardless, or they just wouldn't.
And it's hard to tell at what point, like, I can't really say at what point you have enough people to start a Patreon, because I'm YouTube based. I would say definitely around 25,000 subscribers for sure. I don't think 5,000 is enough. So somewhere in between there. But if you're not a YouTuber and you use something like a Tumblr or what else is popular, Twitch, could you Patreon a Twitch? I suppose so.
Yeah, because that's ongoing stuff.
Yeah.
But then again, you don't really need to Patreon a Twitch because it already has its, you can tip someone directly on stream.
Yeah. So, yes, that platform, not so much. That's why I was kind of like, they already have it built into their system.
And that's why I was sort of leaning towards that direction more in earlier years, because it's immediate. They can send a tip with a suggestion, and then I can, do a little drawing for you right here and now. So there is that sort of back and forth and a little bit of interactivity. And you can sort of make games and interactivity out of those events, which I think as like artists and animators is more engaging than tipping a gamer, because all they're going to be doing is playing the game or reading out a message. But you can start crafting artworks around people's suggestions and contributions, which I thought would be a lot of fun. But then I was physically disabled from doing that.
We should probably check your streaming settings. I think we can probably get it set up so you can stream, because I know what YouTube suggests is actually not what works.
I should probably just try it again now that I have better hardware, because these recordings have been fine so far. Haven't noticed any major issues, and we're also recording it on the side. And I definitely couldn't do that before. Doing just a regular screen capture for my normal tutorials on my old computer was starting to become a bit taxing. But now I record pretty much everything I do just because I can. It doesn't harm anything. And then I can just speed it all up to 6,000% in post and just be like, oh, look at how productive or unproductive my workday was. There's a gap of 5 seconds. That means 5 minutes where nothing happened. What was I doing? How can I improve that? But I'm not that good. The gaps are much more than that. Anyway, I'm rambling. I think we're coming on time for this one, actually.
Yes, we are. So any last thoughts about Patreon, Kickstarter, that sort of thing?
Oh, not from me. I'll just be very curious to hear what listeners' thoughts are, really. It will have a huge influence on what step I take next.
Yeah, so should he start one? You decide, and we'll come back to it.
Oh, don't decide. I don't want to feel shackled to what people want me to do.
Oh, no. Now it's about to...
But helpful suggestions will go a long way.
Fear of obligation. Okay, helpful suggestions on that topic.
Cool.
Thanks for joining us. See you next time.
Thanks for the advice. Bye.